Again, welcome again. And for anyone who just hopped on, and throughout this presentation or workshop, I encourage you to move your body periodically. All right. So again, you are a Mingjue body. You're an embodied consciousness. And so you get to choose, you get to feel, you get to experience your body and choose how to respond, right? So if you don't want to sit there like a regular science boring lecture, please stand up, do hang ha, just please mute yourself, do whatever it is that you need to do, okay? All right. So let me get started. Where did my presentation go? Okay. Okay, so again, I'll just see how long this goes, and I'd love to open it up at the end, either for questions or reflections. Okay? And if you aren't already, please mute yourself. All right. So really today, we're just going to be talking again about the clinical correlates of Mingjue and Qi science. All right, so these slides, the ones that have Teacher Wei's what is this called? The logo will just connote that this is this is directly taken from his content from this current 8-month course. All right, and for anyone who's not currently enrolled in it, it's fine. You don't have to know everything either. It's very basic stuff that I'm going to be drawing from. All right. So basically, Qi science is what Teacher Wei and this tradition is referencing what is once known as Zen and qigong. And at the end, by the end of it, you'll kind of understand why it's going in this direction. But really, the objective, the hope is that through learning and practice to research the characteristics and principles of Qi, and then to serve human life in the world, okay? And so in this talk, what I really want to do is explore the clinical science, right, to expand our mental frameworks, to enhance healing for ourselves and each other. And really this also falls into the concept of trust, is to begin to understand mentally actually what some of these things is that we've been doing. So this one is taken directly from the website, daohearts.com. Mingjue, this term, really, it just boils down to two characters, Ming, meaning clear, Jue, meaning awareness or observer, okay? Or observation, the state of observation. So we can understand Mingjue as our inner observer that achieves a state of self-awareness. Okay, so even that can feel opaque to some of us. And it's really just becoming aware that we are conscious beings, okay, that we're conscious bodies. So when we typically think of states of being, and this is both in the medical, the conventional medical world, as well as, in the dominant frameworks, is we tend to think of two different states, right? We're either comfortable or we're uncomfortable. We're either relaxed or we're stressed. And we sort of bounce between this duality. And in medicine, for sure, what we do is we want to move, as much as we can from discomfort and stress over to comfort and relaxation, right? So most of our drugs are anti-something, right? Anti-inflammation, anti-high blood pressure, anti-anxiety. And so we're kind of fighting the state of discomfort and stress, and we'll do whatever we can to be comfortable and relaxed. And there's this third state of being, which we tend to forget. And it's a flow state, right? And in the flow state, it's different than simple relaxation. It's relaxation coupled with energy activation or energy flow, okay? So this concept of flow was popularized over the last decade as a psychological state of peak performance, right? Whether you're a gifted athlete, whether you're a singer, an artist, people can experience flow states, again, in this state of peak performance. It's usually related to an activity that they really enjoy. And so really, for the last several years, I've been exploring, what about flow as an ordinary person? How does flow relate to healing? And is this something we can access? And healing is not necessarily an activity that a lot of us enjoy or want to be, or this journey that we want to be on, and yet we find ourselves on it. So how do we access it? And what does it actually do? What does it add? Right? So flow, I'm speaking to people who are aware of this concept, very well aware, not just conceptually, but experientially, right? That qigong, and I put qigong and tai chi because in the West, actually here, almost all of the research studies group those two together. All right, and they're very, very related. So they're grouped together, Tai Chi being much more commonly heard of and practiced, and Qigong becoming a rapidly rising sector, at least in the American West, and integrative medicine. All right, so in a lot of these studies, and again, in this workshop, I'm not going into the weeds of the studies, I'm going to give a big overview, but Qigong has both been measured as a flow state, but also subjectively, the participants from beginners to seasoned practitioners, right? And it's important, the beginners, and they also have looked at beginners in the East, in China, and beginners in the West, Germany, and other European countries. So, but they all have been able to cultivate this subjective sense of activated calm. Okay, so again, correlating that with this flow state, but instead of a psychological flow state, it's an embodied one, right? So in neuroscience now, there is a clinical correlate for this flow state, and it's called physiological coherence or just coherence. Okay. And so again, just a brief review of the autonomic nervous system, right? This is a nervous system that controls largely subconscious bodily functions, right? And without it functioning well, those who have had dysfunctions of the autonomic nervous system or, or sort of quote, nervous breakdowns and similar conditions know what it feels like when the autonomic nervous system is not working properly, right? So again, usually we tend to be very dualistic. We a lot of us know about the rest and restore, rest and digest, whatever you want to call the parasympathetic housekeeping branch of the autonomic nervous system. And it really promotes, right, kind of the functions that we need to thrive every day, right? Digestion and slower heart rate and building up the body, right? And healing happens in the parasympathetic state. So, or I should say natural healing. Natural healing happens in the parasympathetic state. Then we have the sympathetic state, which gets a really bad rap, but we do need the sympathetic state, right? It gets us out of trouble. When there's a big or small crisis, right? We have to increase blood to the vital organs to get us out of that situation. But it gets a bad rap because, of course, most of us are totally dominant in sympathetic state. Because we're in chronic stress. So even when the actual stressor is not there, we're in this conditioned pattern. So it's like a Pavlov's dog, right? We've been conditioned to be in it, but we have not been consciously awoken enough, practiced enough to be able to bring that system down. And so again, this is going back to Teacher Wei's Science of Consciousness course. The first thing that he talks about in practice is relaxation. All right. So relaxation is not the flow state, but it's a component of it, and it's a portal to the flow state. Okay. So yeah, this was just reiterating what I just said. And so the next piece I wanted to just jump into is observation. So he talks about the shu sound and opening the inner space, right, to subtle energies, and the emptiness is part of observation, but the deeper practice is actually observation. Okay, so when we are practicing that, we're already beginning to not just relax, but we're relaxed because we're observing and connecting to the subtler dimensions of our being and the world. All right, so this does something really important. Okay, so these are human brain waves, and normally we're in beta state. Okay, so we're thinking, we're alert, we're analyzing, we're judging, we're doing these things all the time. There's an estimate, nobody has agreed on how to measure a thought. So depending on how you measure it and with which modality, it's anywhere from like 6,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day. Okay, so we're continually doing this, whether we're aware of it or not. And so in neurophysiology, right, coherence as flow, we actually call this incoherent, or an incoherent state. And this is referring to the energy flow, but it can actually refer to me not making sense, right? Because my mind is just going. So when we shift to a relaxation state where we're observing and we're concentrating, again, in a way that's relaxed, we shift into alpha, okay? Just by that simple practice, right? So if you're feeling like, oh my God, nothing's happening in my practice and I'm doing this and I can't experience subtle energies, it doesn't matter. We just shift from thinking to looking, listening, and observing, okay? And in this state, we become very creative, right? So again, we open more, the brain functions more coherently, okay? So this is a coherent state. So one thing I want to encourage you right now is instead of thinking and looking at the screen or looking at me, is can you shift to looking and listening? And for some of you, this will come really easily. For others, it may be very elusive. All right, so this is taken from Mingjue Awakening, Teacher Wei's book. And again, 4 key practices, right? Observation, concentration, relaxation. So these 3 steps naturally lead to the 4th, which is transformation. Okay, so embedded in this ancient and new wisdom are ways in which we are coming into this coherent state. We are coming into this flow state. Okay. And coherence, the term, right, comes from cohere, which means to stick together. And so what happens in coherence with the brain is that all the different regions of the brain that are doing a lot of different complex things, they function as one unit, okay? And that's a really important shift. So it is a state of where energy is conserved and energy is very, very efficient. Okay, so what does that mean? Not only do you function better and you think more clearly and you learn things more efficiently, but you have more energy. Your body has more energy for healing. All right, so then we move down the spectrum to theta. And again, these are just, I'm very much giving the overview, but theta, when we experience this, inner peace, this happens in meditation, REM sleep, hypnosis, and there's intuition is heightened, and then states of oneness, all right? This tends to be a state of oneness that is kind of empty, right? So when Teacher Wei talks about, we become empty, our bodies are empty, we merge with the empty universe, tianren he, the state of oneness, is likely when you're experiencing it and practicing it, you're coming into theta. Okay, so again, we're going deeper into the coherence spectrum. Okay, so again, my correlation with what's happening with the Mingjue state, right? Because Teacher Wei will talk about, I mean, some people, some of you may go into a deep trance, right? Or into a very deep sleep where you're not fully asleep, or maybe you are actually fully asleep. But then you can also be in the Mingjue state when you're awake, right? So what is that? And one of the reasons why it's kind of elusive in terms of just a broad statement is that it's a spectrum, all right? So if we're correlating it with coherence, it is the spectrum. Again, in alpha, we can be alert and interfacing with life, okay? So in delta, right, we fall into this dreamless sleep, deep meditation. This tends to be more advanced practitioners, but again, people can spontaneously tap into this state during meditation as well. And then the last one, gamma, is a little bit of a mixed bag. It's an arousal state, so you can be incoherent, right? So like if we're so excited, so enthusiastic, we can actually be in gamma incoherence. And then when we come into this arousal state of oneness, that is more of a bliss state rather than the empty state, we can, again, be in this high coherence, okay? And one of my favorite lines from Teacher Wei in one of his classes was he said, yeah, Mingjue state is a little bit like you're drunk, you know, you're in this kind of trance state. And then he said, but, you know, in order to interface with the world, just be a little drunk, all right? Just be a little bit drunk. So keep that state relaxed, open, uninhibited, loving, and yet focused, okay? Drunk on qi and drunk on Mingjue, by the way, not drunk on alcohol, okay? So, and this is just, again, this is just a study that was really talking about when our brain is in coherence, one of the reasons, there's multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons is that it's a peak healing state, is that the lymphatic system, which is a system that's somewhat like the lymphatics, right, which clear all sorts of toxins from our body, that's operating all the time. We tend to overlook it. But there's a system in the brain called the glymphatics, which does that for the nervous system, and it opens up 4 times during delta states, okay? So it is clearing stuff, toxins, waste, metabolites out of the brain, and it's really associated with, there's a lot of correlations now between a healthy glymphatic state and our system and lower incidence of neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia and other conditions like Parkinson's, all right? So in the beta thinking states, right, where most of us spend most of our days, and some of our nights actually, we have the lowest lymphatic activity, okay? So sleep is important, and as Teacher Wei had really emphasized at this retreat, if we don't sleep, but we're practicing Mingjue, that's also really, really healthy. So next down the line in Teacher Wei's objectives in this course, he's talking about building building the Mingjue consciousness field, right? And so oftentimes you'll hear a phrase like, our pure baby hearts are merging together, okay? And I mean, what does that mean, you know, in terms of neurophysiology and experience? So if we go deeper into coherence, this notion, what's very interesting is that in Chinese, the character xing actually refers to both the brain, the mind, and the heart. There's no distinction, okay? And now science is showing that to be true. And we call it, because we have this notion of a separate, 2 separate organ systems, we actually call it heart-brain coherence. But it's when the brain and the heart, again, coherence, right, meaning to stick together, the brain and the heart stick together and they function as one unit. Okay, again, very energy efficient state, lots of intuition, a lot of intuitive signals actually come in through the heart field and feed up to the brain. Okay. And so the reason why the heart field is so important in neuroscience, but also in this practice, is that it's the largest EMF field in humans. And the EMF field that I'm going to be talking about, from my understanding of it, again, a general correlate is that this is bodily chi. Okay, so it's a stronger chi that some of us can feel naturally, and then others through practice will begin to cultivate, or they can, you can sense into it. And for some, it's very difficult to sense. And it doesn't matter. Teacher Wei is always talking about it doesn't matter. You just know that this is happening. Okay. So again, this, depending on the different studies, looking at how large this field is, it's somewhere between 1,000 to 5,000 times the strength of the brain's EMF field. Okay, so it's significant. And what happens, right, when we come into heart-brain coherence and we have this heart coherence, is that because of the largeness and the strength of this field, we come into whole body coherence. The body can come into one and everything can stick together. And in that state, the cells function optimally. So healing is optimal, you're relaxed, right? You're observing, everything is flowing in a much more efficient way. All right, so the flow state, just like this young woman who's getting ready for a tennis serve, right? What's she doing? She's going back and forth. Why? Because she can then be ready for anything that's coming her way, right? So that's what happens in coherence, is that, again, it's not like I want to be in parasympathetic and stay there. It's no, I want to actually exercise both branches in a very healthy, flexible, resilient way. This is actually the physiological definition of resilience, right? The capacity to bounce back, the capacity to respond to anything. So we want actually this beautiful volleying between the nervous systems. And that's, again, also what some of these practices are really bringing us into through coherence, all right? And so this is just to say that the way that we measure this in medicine, the simplest measurement and a good correlate for heart coherence is a measurement called heart rate variability, okay? And the reason I'm explaining that is because I'm just going to be going through some of what heart rate variability looks like. So in general, you want higher heart rate variabilities, okay? It means you have a much more flexible nervous system to respond. So again, incoherence, this is heart rate variability, right? You see these kind of sawtooth patterns. And so this happens when we're not even frustrated or anxious. This happens when we're thinking, when we're analyzing, when we're judging, okay? But you add incoherent emotions to it, right? This is one area of practice that we're really, really practicing in Qi science and Qigong, is to, how do we transform these emotions into ones that are coherent, right? So positive emotions, gratitude, love, care, all right? So it shifts, again, the heart waves, the heart rate variability waves, into these beautiful, smooth patterns, okay? And then healing doesn't just happen naturally, it actually happens optimally, okay? So you think about all the people who've been having kind of miraculous healing experiences or miraculous transformations of their emotional states or their relationships. And we're really looking at, something beyond natural healing is happening. So mental and emotional attachments or blockages also create incoherence, right? So much of what we're practicing is attachments, observing them, removing them, transforming them. Even attachments that we deem good, okay? And then the term that is often used in Qi science is harmony or harmonizing information. Okay. So as far as I understand, harmony, coherence, flow, they're all speaking of the same thing. So my preference, instead of good information, which is something that the judging thinking mind can judge and think itself into incoherence, is to call it harmonizing information, right? So we relax the duality between good and bad. And also harmonizing is a process. So sometimes we might not be fully harmonized in our information, but we are harmonizing, okay? And again, if we are thinking, this is not thinking positive emotions. It's not positive thinking. Because if we do that, we're in the beta state, right? We're in the incoherent, non-Mingjue state. This is a full body, open-hearted experience of harmonizing emotions. And so the next area I want to really highlight is group coherence. Okay, so if the EMF field, I didn't actually say, is it's measured to be on average about 3 feet out from the body, right? It's like this torus shape. It's like a big donut. You can imagine a big donut flowing. And since it's so large, and some people, it's been measured out to be as far out as 10 feet, okay? So again, this is going to differ from individuals. It's going to differ from the field that they have flowing. But the average person, even people who are not practicing flow, it goes out about 3 feet, okay? So when we are together, we are in each other's fields, literally, okay? So if you're feeling something a little bit off or a little bit, oh my God, vibrant, I like this person's vibes, it's often related to this field. And again, this is just the EMF field. So it's probably what I think is the bodily chi. It's a stronger field of subtle energies. But imagine, right, that we have much, much subtler fields that technologies are not measuring yet. So, but in qigong, we've been practicing this. So the fields are immense, okay? And I'm just going to show one study that has been done by HeartMath Institute in California. They did 148 of these 10-minute trials. So this is just 10 minutes. This is not going into Mingjue state for an hour or two, right? So they had 3 people who were practicing and they knew how to come into coherence. And they were all hooked up to biofeedback monitors. They had a blinded person come in. Again, they did this 148 times, who, stood within a certain feet of these 3 people. There were no words exchanged. It just kind of came in and sat down or stood up. And that a person, again, in their field could come into coherence without their awareness. So this blinded person is not practicing anything. They're just walking into a room, okay? So this is how we affect each other. This is how, when we walk into a room, we can naturally relax and feel the light because it's actually happening on an energy level. So what they found in these studies is that this blinded person coming into coherence did not happen every time. In fact, it was pretty consistent across the board, about 50% of the time in this study, as well as other studies, that this blinded person could be brought into coherence. And what were the factors that increased their chances? Well, part of it depended on the capacity of the people who are practicing coherence, right? And we experience that in qigong and qi science all the time, right? If there's a teacher, if there's a group, we can experience, oh yeah, you know what? Whoa, I just came into this state. But this other piece, relationship and trust and a supportive environment. So if this blinded person felt like, oh, you know what? I actually feel like they're supporting me. They had a much more increased chance of coming into coherence. So again, they're relaxed, they're open, they're kind of observing, and then the field can help bring them into coherence. And then relationship of trust, all right? Big pieces. And so this is from the superior view. right? So if we're standing in each other's fields, we're creating this beautiful geometry, okay? So the other piece about coherence is that if you remember the waves, right, that the coherence waves are much stabler, right? They're regular in pattern. They also are stronger. And so it's hypothesized, this part has not been proven yet, but that when we're in coherence, that we have a much better chance, if we're practicing it, to bring someone out of incoherence into coherence than the other way around. Okay? Because I know what happens in daily life, you know, when we have triggers, when we, again, we're in beta, right? We're not in flow, but it's very easy for us to feel like, oh my God, you know, someone else comes in and they're more incoherent than we are, and they're more frantic, they're more upset, and we get easily pulled into incoherence. Or maybe we're practicing and we're in a beautiful Mingjue state, and then someone triggers us and we're completely out of it. So again, this is validation, this is affirmation, this is support, right? For you to continue practicing and tapping into staying centered in yourself so that coherence is stable. And this is one of the most loving gifts we can give someone else, right? Bring them into coherence without them even knowing. And so the collective heart field, well, what happens when we come together? Again, this is the superior view, right? Much more powerful and much more stable. Okay. So when Mingjue healing happens, right, it's the field that's doing this healing. Okay. It's very different than the former paradigm of in qigong healing, actually, of my qi, I'm giving qi to you to heal your problem. Okay. Where one person can get drained, and oftentimes, you know, with a minimum benefit to the recipient, depending on the skill level of the healer. Mingjue healing is collective, and the person receiving the healing is also practicing along. Okay, so it's a total game changer. And the way I explain it is, it's similar to like, okay, you know, a flashlight needing to flash its, you know, light on someone, and then then the battery needs to be recharged. And so, okay, you know what? That was great. That was great that we had rechargeable batteries as a technology. But no, now we have the capacity to plug into an outlet that is connected to solar panels. And so it's a connection to an infinite field that is sustainable and never extinguishes. Okay. And just as a playful, you know, experience is like, you know, 2 weeks ago, 50 of us in the US were gathered. And when we're practicing together, we're creating just these beautiful harmonic fields and patterns with each other. Okay. So as I noted earlier, that's just with the EMF field that's measurable. So what about these subtler fields that fill our outer universe, and they fill our inner universe as well? Okay, and so this is now broaching on quantum field theory, which we won't go into today. But quantum field theory is a very, very well and widely accepted theory of how these subtle fields are filling the whole universe. And this is exactly what Mingjue practice has been, that we've been tapping into. And anyone who has experienced remote healing, which I have, and also every live session or every not even live session anymore, right? Just connecting consciously to the field, because we've been practicing together, the relationships have been developed, and the trust and their support is that, wow, this healing field is there everywhere all the time. So this is, again, taken from Mingjue Awakening, Teacher Wei's book, right? The foundation of Mingjue practice is practicing in community, right? In the courses of the World Consciousness Community, the community practices as one. The World Consciousness Community practices as a collective field rooted in love. When students and teachers practice together in this universal collective field, everyone is equal, because in the field, everyone has the same potential and everyone supports each other, right? So also, you know what? There are a lot of times that we give and a lot of times we receive, but continuing to kind of go into a community to receive collective field healing also is not Mingjue practice, right? Is that we recognize our own sovereignty, our own autonomy, our own critical role in the collective. Okay? So when coherence becomes incoherence, right, this is what I was alluding to earlier, was that when we cling to good emotion states, including the flow states, the qi or Mingjue states, or to the methods, like, oh, this state feels so good. I feel so empty. I feel so abundant. If we attach emotionally to that, we actually bring ourselves out of Mingjue state, out of flow, and we go into incoherence. So it is a continual practice of observing ourselves, of emptying ourselves, right, of any attachments that we have. So attachments also that are always bringing us, to other people who can bring us into coherence, right? Like, I want to be with this person because this person makes me feel good. And then attachments to teachers. And so Teacher Wei is often saying, don't attach to me. So when we connect in the collective field, we are harmonizing our fields, right? So we're connecting to the unconditional love, universal wisdom of the collective field. It's not the identities of each other, okay? Which again, at the identity level, the story level, we go back into incoherence, okay? So the foundation of the Mingjue practice, and I think this is one that often we forget because the Mingjue state can be very delicious and again, can feel like we're drunk or can feel like a drug and we just want to be there. Well, Mingjue is the meaning of it, right? Is the inner observer observes itself. And again, another way that I like to phrase it is we become aware of our inner awareness. So we're aware that we're aware. We're aware that we're conscious beings. Okay, so whenever we shift, the only way to come to that is to come back to ourselves, is not to lose ourselves on the collective field outside and other people. And then the other thing about this practice is that when we come within, we also realize that the collective field is within us, right? So it's this torus and it flows out and it flows in, flows out and it flows in. So the energy universe, the infinite fields, they're all within us, right? And so recognizing again, who is behind the flow state, who is choosing to practice, who is this person observing that we're in flow, right? So when we come back to that place, we become the master and the co-creator of our lives, right? And our health. So lastly, I want to go back to the Qi Science page, the objectives, right? So we're learning how to, we were learning about the theories and the methods to practice the principles of Qi, but then this part is really, really big. And we then serve human life and the world, okay? So we don't just stay blissed out or empty and, kind of detached from the rest of the world, right? So the methods we've been learning, right? The shu sound, again, emptying, right? The shu sound means that form dissolves into energy and then energy becomes finer and finer. So this gives us a sense of oneness between our bodies and the universe, right? And so instantly we can shift our brainwaves. Okay, the n sound, we shift from thinking, analyzing, judging to coming within ourselves and we observe. And again, changing our brain waves. And one thing I wanted to show you also was that when we practice an upper dantian, right? So when we do shu and we empty our upper dantian space, or we do the n sound and we come back to Shinji Palace here, right? Shinji Palace roughly correlates with the pineal gland, and then upper dantian with these organs here. And so basically motor coordination, sensory perception, pineal gland is intuition, and also the master circadian organ, regulating all the other glands in the body. Hippocampus memory, amygdala, emotional processing, pituitary, and the hypothalamus. There's two pituitary glands actually, and the hypothalamus are the master hormone regulators. So again, I'm just sharing this because, some of this we can feel like, okay, why are we continuing to do this practice and nothing's really happening? But to know the potency of these very simple, essential practices and that they are healing and bringing all of these organs into coherence and flow and optimizing function, right? Talk about healing trauma, talk about, opening intuition. So these are profoundly powerful practices. So do not let the simplicity fool you, okay? Open and close, right? Or la chi, right? Again, when we're opening and closing, right? The subtle energy between our palms, which links with the infinite universe that's empty, and then it merges with our empty universe within, right? So we go beyond our senses. So sensing and perceiving this emptiness also changes our brainwaves. Right. So another practice that's been very much highlighted in the last couple of modules is opening and closing La Chi in the four universe Chi centers. Right. So here we have the four centers that we're practicing in. Right. So we have upper Dantian, middle Dantian, this is Hunyuan Palace, and then lower Dantian. Okay. And so just clinically, we can correlate that. This is the vagus nerve, right? The vagus nerve being the godfather of the parasympathetic nervous system or the relaxation system, or the system that we really need to activate in order to come into that volleying flow state, right? Where heart rate variability is maximum. We want to really activate this, make it more dominant. And so the vagus nerve is, looky here. It is in the upper Dantian space, the middle Dantian space, and the Hunyuan Palace lower Dantian space, okay? The three brains. So now we know also, right, that there's the head brain, the heart is also called a brain, and then the gut is also called a brain. And that we're calling them a brain because they have intrinsic nervous systems that can operate independently or semi-independently. And so they're each, the gut and the heart also are receiving information and continuing sending it up to the head brain. So again, correlating with the three dantians. And then also, as we learned in coherence, right, the organs begin to cohere and function as one, right? So again, when we practice the three centers, or in this case, the four centers as well, is that they begin to merge together as one, okay? So again, there's a sophistication with these methods, even though they are deceptively simple. So the Mingjue mantra, the I am Mingjue love, I am Mingjue peace, I am Mingjue happiness, I am Mingjue gratitude. Gratitude, all of these, again, harmonizing emotions are, when we experience them from the heart center in the embodied way, not in the thinking way, they begin to make coherent our heart fields, right? And then when we do the Mingjue mantra as a collective, we are Mingjue love, we are Mingjue peace, we are Mingjue happiness, we are Mingjue gratitude. We are activating the collective, bringing the collective field into coherence, right? Or what I call the big I, because it's a collective field, but then it becomes unitive as well. And then lastly, just wanted to share that, so all these other ones, Mingmen breathing, Hunyuan Palace breathing, and then the movements, the big circulation caterpillar, entire open and close, rotate spine, open and close in the four universe centers. All of these are breathing methods, right? Either literally directly working with the breath, or it's the body as breath, right? Opening and closing, gathering and dispersing, in and out. And so breathing is another tried and true method, scientifically anyhow, that can bring us into coherence. Okay, so, and then in Mingjue practice, you bring all of those things together, and you bring universal mind, collective field, massive heart fields, big consciousness fields, and into the body movements. So it is just a beautiful formula for activating major flow. All right, so Teacher Wei said, practice the dynamic movements so slowly that you are in the same state as during static meditations. This can help Mingjue practice stillness and stability in the movements of daily life. Okay, so that's really important that each time we're practicing movements, that we're practicing for moving and interacting in daily life, right? So again, we're not detaching or retreating from life, right? Mingjue is a greater presence. It's more presence. And so every action that we do from Mingjue state, right, we can bring harmony and healing to ourselves and to other people. So it can be walking the dog, right? It can be doing our favorite morning routine, right, with awareness, observing. It can be interacting with someone who's upset at us, right? It can be sitting in a doctor's office. What would that be like? How would that encounter change, right? If we are practicing coherence and coming into that visit, helping to bring the healthcare practitioner into coherence, bringing coherence to how we face the world, right? And everything in the complex level of duality. And so one of the, I guess, the big ahas for me was that I had always thought of, qigong as, oh, like we're rediscovering ancient wisdom. And we are, it's coming back. And at the same time, one of the reasons why I really appreciate this reframing of Zen and Qigong and all the other names that this lineage has gone through to Qi science is that it's the ancient and the new. The new information, the new science is actually changing the way the ancient wisdom has evolved, right? It's making it more accessible, it's making it more relatable. It's also the technologies are allowing us to amplify the collective field in a way that we haven't been able to before, right? So it is this beautiful continual coevolution, and the foundational process for all of this is Huanhua, right? Huanhua, merging Hua, transforming. So everything is continually merging and transforming and co-evolving, co-creating each other. And so can we, as conscious beings, be a part of that process in a very conscious way? Yeah. And when we do, we heal ourselves as a side effect, not as a goal, but as a side effect. And that is the beauty and the promise and the amazing sophistication of a method and a system that is deceptively simple. So I wanted to stop there, and I'm not sure why my view is, anyways, I will put on gallery view. Okay. And really, there are a couple of things. So we're right at the top of the hour, and please, of course, for anyone who needs to drop off, please drop off. The rest of this will be recorded, but I'd love to open it up for questions or reflections, either that, or we could do a very short practice to experience the 4 centers or the 3 centers. But of course, you can take that into your next daily practice. Yeah, Tom.
First off, thanks. That was just so beautifully brought forward for all of us. I got a lot of great benefits. What it brought up for me as a guy who came out of the business world and very much lived most of my life in beta, how this work has started and continued to transform me. But I was surprised. I got a heart math monitor, which measures heart-brain coherence.
Mhm.
And even with all my practice, I was surprised that I wasn't in incoherence at different times, and that I really didn't understand in my body when I was moving into coherence. And that monitor really helped me start to get a deeper embodied sense
Mm.
versus my mind sense of it. And so I've started to practice with that monitor. And for me, I have an anxiety condition, which is, I think, generated by my habit of being in beta. And so I think that monitor, along with our practice, has been gives me a lot of a pathway that's been very helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Both your experience, but also the suggestion. So yeah, there are biofeedback monitors that you can get. They tend to average $200 or $300. You can get kind of fancy. There are ones that measure brain coherence, and then ones that measure heart rate coherence. And most of them are they link up, to an app on your phone, so you can measure it wherever you are. And yeah, and for a lot of people, I've heard they're just like, oh, I've been meditating, for 5 years, and then I didn't realize it was just like totally staying in my head. I was not bringing it down, and so, or I wasn't getting into that state. So it can be very, very useful. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's a great resource. And then again, because we're all different and we're wired really differently, we have totally different attachments and blockages. And somebody had gifted me one as well, and I tried it, and it ended up keeping me. I mean, I could sort of biohack it. I'd be like, oh, okay, I can breathe in for 5 and then breathe out for 5, and I could come into coherence. But it, um, but it kept me kind of in thinking mode, because I was thinking, I was analyzing what was I doing. And so the beauty of the Mingjue practice is, so again, we can biohack our ways into health too, right? Or more healing states. But that the Mingjue practice it's a coming back to ourselves. And to this point, Tom, that you raise is it reduces anxiety, right? It reduces these states that we each have that are challenging for us. And so, oh, if we come back to ourselves, it doesn't matter if it's anxiety, if it's detachment, if it's, anger, whatever. Oh, all of it kind of melts away, or harmonizes at once. So yeah, but they're so useful for many, many people. So do look those up if you guys get a chance. And while we're waiting, invite you guys to breathe into lower dantian if you're not already. Breathe into the center of your abdomen. Just observing how when you do that, you return to yourself. So your primary focus is within. Right? Teacher Wei says maybe it's about 70% centered within yourself, 30% is focused on what's happening in front. So just observing the screen, listening from that place, helping to bring our field into coherence. Yeah, Linda.
Hi, I just want to thank you so much for articulating so beautifully, because my mind likes to have some understanding of all of this. And it I really appreciate the reminder of the collective field and the way that we pass someone on the street and we've been in each other's field. Um, but mainly just I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again because there's so much information in a short amount of time, that is incredibly helpful. And that's it, really. I'm just this has been very eye-opening, and there have been a few aha moments So I just really appreciate the way that you clarify things for me. It happens every time. So thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for your presence. Eye opening is great. And if you can allow heart opening, allow it to be heart opening. Yeah. So one way I like to simplify things is Mingjue state is mind empty, heart open, and then body is fully inhabited. Okay. So those three centers, the dantians, which is why breathing in lower dantian is so powerful, so instant, right? Is Mingjue returns to self, and then when Mingjue, the consciousness comes down to the lower abdomen, you fully inhabit yourself. So when lower dantian qi is really strong, right, the physical dimension of the body becomes very strong. Your creativity enhances, your resilience enhances. So continuing to do that. Yeah, and I just want to thank everyone for showing up. I mean, whether you're present right now or watching the recording later, is just we can also, I don't know, discount the fact that we're showing up as a collective, right? And again, bringing that awareness back to yourself. You are a conscious being. You chose, whether you're aware of it or not, you chose to show up today and to connect with each other. It's an act of trust. It's an act of openness. Even if we're skeptical, even if we're like, what is this chi science stuff? You showed up. So there's an opening. Let's see, Jeremy and then Shauna.
Hi, Cynthia. Thank you.
Hi, Jeremy.
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand a bit more about coherence, and also, were you saying that it's kind of a one-way street, that like if we're around other fields or other people where it may be a toxic environment and we enter that environment, approximately, right?
Mm-hmm.
That how does coherence keep that toxicity away, or does it? Or do we need to physically move away?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So yeah, so energy is just energy, right? And at the energy
Right.
level, it's neutral. Energy doesn't really care if it's incoherent or not coherent. We care, and then our bodies feel a certain effect. So if we are not conscious, and again, I don't want to say conscious. So what they've also found in these studies, and again, we're referring to the studies because we have that as data, but it's also the lived experience, right? Is that again, we can practice 5 minutes of coherence, we can practice 5 minutes of Mingjue state and be in this beautiful state, like, oh, okay, I know what this feels like. But spontaneous coherence it does happen, it's rare. All right. So the practice is to practice enough to where the default state is coherence, right? Oh, I know I am Mingjue moving throughout my day. Or we become so used to feeling this flow state that when we're out of flow state, we can also very quickly, I feel resistance, and then come back to that. So it sort of becomes its own feed forward cycle. We want to actually cultivate that. And again, if we're trying to do it for healing or awakening, it doesn't really matter. The more we practice and we stay in that state, the more we can maintain it. The more we can even maintain it as a natural state, as a default state. Okay. So that's like a level of mastery, right? And so you see people who are just like completely, quote, Zen, in amid some like riot or something. Those are like people who can keep and maintain that state.
Mm-hmm.
For most of us, it's going to be a physical removal, from that field. But again, if we're aware, we're not just kind of avoiding it. We're not just, oh my God, I can't handle it, I'm just going to leave. No, I'm going to leave because I recognize I've lost my Mingjue state. I'm going to practice and come back into it. And so we can do incremental exposures, right? So like going into like I don't know, like a mass protest about something might be a little bit intense. Or even going into a family reunion that's really large might be a little bit intense. No, so practice like, and this is my series in Mingjue and Daily Life. We practice actually with images of things, right? We practice like what I showed today. Oh, there's a doctor, oh, there's someone upset at you. Practice with that. What is your state, right? And then in your home, oh, you know what? I'm going to walk into this room where I last had a conflict with, my teenager, and just practice maintaining that state when you have, in the incremental zone, right? So you're a little bit challenged, but not overly challenged to where you're going to lose your state. Okay, but you want to find that zone of discomfort and then practice into that. So yeah, and you might surprise yourself. Now, what we've also found with Mingjue practitioners is that practicing, doing incremental exposures and training your gongfu. But then oftentimes what happens is that there's a major crisis happening. Maybe it's overwhelming pain. Maybe it's everything in your life is falling apart. People dying, people having major health problems, right? Losing your house. I mean, like everything. And then Mingjue is fully present, right? Because it's so much that there's nothing that the reference framework can hold on to anymore, cannot clasp on because it's too much. And then Mingjue is fully present. So sometimes it happens that way, but that's usually for people who've been practicing a lot, right? And then you have a really big trigger, and then Mingjue is there. Okay, but it's a great question. So again, yeah, and again, Mingjue is not a retreat, right? It's not a retreat. So if you're in a place and it feels really toxic, it is about you being present to yourself. How can I be fully present? So think of that field, right? So it's naturally transforming. So it's not a small field that's protecting you, which is actually incoherence. It's a flowing field. And so, you might affect people around you, right? But mostly you're just staying open, you're staying flowing. So even that visual of that field can be really helpful. All right, so Mingjue is centered, but energy is flowing. Okay, heart is open. Thank you for that. Shauna.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thank you for your beautiful presentation. This question is about you saw your representation of the field of beings, sort of, or originating from beings, and then you alluded to the quantum level. So in Shineng Qigong, it seems to me there's a permanent or stable healing field that has been created over time that it exists kind of in a timeless realm.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if you could make any connections in terms of science between what's measurable and this kind of other way that's key to Shineng Qigong healing, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, quantum field theory is a very, very complex theory, but in its simplicity and its essence, it correlates very, very closely. I won't say exactly, and some of the wording is different, but correlates very closely with the Qi science teachings. And so that everything that we see, touch, feel, everything that we can sense has a field associated with it, right? And so like the chair you're sitting on, we're not really sitting on the chair. It's our two fields kind of creating this cushion that then feels like we're sitting on the chair, okay? And so, but that all the empty space is also filled with fields, right? And then I don't have to go into it, but anyways, there's 4 general different categories. and varying strengths. And so very similar to Qi science is, yeah, it fills the whole universe. And Qi science talks about it a little bit like more like a matrix, like it's like a medium, right? Like, oh, enough energy builds, and then it becomes form, which is a slight difference from the quantum field theory. But again, it's very, very similar. Like all matter emerges from the quantum field, and then all matter will dissolve back into it, right? And but in the quantum field theory, it talks about excitation. So you have this level of, it's called 0 point energy. You have all the fields have this very, very low level of energy, which is again kind of empty but not empty. So it's not zero, but it's kind of like a vacuum. So there's many, many parallels to the language, but they're taught in slightly different ways in terms of how we relate to them. Now, the thing I find interesting about quantum field theory, which shows very much about our reference frameworks, is that it shows that these fields are all within us too, right? But that we don't interact with them, so it's somehow like this is everywhere and we humans are kind of outside of it. Like we don't, it doesn't interact with us. And so that I find a little, just kind of humorous. But that's kind of where the general science is anyways, the predominant thinking is. There are definitely scientists who are leading at a different, edge about how we cultivate and relate to it and connect to it. But yeah, but it's a powerful, powerful field that I think that connects all of us in both an expansive and an intimate way, right? It's both intimate and expansive. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Anne?
First, I'd like to express my gratitude for today and for the first session together. And this is very, very meaningful and helpful. And also on my personal journey and also in the connection to the community. There's a question that I have that maybe you can help me. Recently, when I feel like I'm going deeper and deeper in my practice, while I feel like I'm a little drunk, at the same time, I feel like excited, like a little child. And so like on one hand, I'm like a little drunk. On the other hand, I'm like excited. And then and then it calms down, but it makes me smile. It's if you can relate to that.
Yeah, I don't know. We each have our own experiences and our own processes, and your sharing of that is really helpful because we kind of learn together. As far as what that is, I mean, I would say, maybe it's a little bit of gamma, the arousal state, and then you can also feel drunk at the same time, because like these brainwaves are also always moving, right? Always moving and transforming. So it's not like we're always just in one state. So, yeah, absolutely. And, again, the Mingjue practice, then you're also just observing all of it without any attachment. So whether it's bad excitement that's making you incoherent, whether it's good excitement, it doesn't matter. Just observing it and being playful with it. I think, you said it makes me smile. Great. Go with that. Just observe it, have fun with it. No attachments. Oh, I feel both drunk and excited at the same time. Well, who knew that was possible? Great. So it's wonderful, really wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So let's wrap things up and invite you all to unmute yourselves if you want to. We can give a collective, let's do a collective Wen Yuan Ling tone. Tone. Yeah. All right. And it might sound a little inharmonious, but we know that it's harmonizing. Okay. Right. Okay. 1, 2, 3. When
When you're Ling Tong.
คุณอยู่อันลิงทงคุณอยู่อันลิงทงคุณอยู่อันลิงทงคุณอยู่อันลิงทงคุณอยู่อันลิงทง
There's Korean.
Khôn nhờ linh tông.